Sarah Ayers. Do you want to introduce yourself, Sarah?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Sarah Ayers. I'm a speech language pathologist and assistive technology specialist with the Special Ed Tech Center.
And I'm Sarah Kinsella, same as Sarah. Glad to have you here. And then Joyful is in the background helping us. So if you have any questions or concerns or um, trouble with Zoom, feel free to message Joyful. She'll be on top of it. Okay.
So, in the spirit of collaboration, we wanted to kick off today's topic of building AAC affirming schools with a couple questions for you all. So, the first question we wanted to start with is what does it mean to have an AAC affirming school? So, what does it mean to all of you? You can either unmute and share out, or you can type in the chat. See a couple things coming in the chat. An openness to alternative forms of communication from all staff members, not just special ed. I love that we talk a lot about how we can involve our general education folks and making it truly AAC affirming across the entire school building rather than just isolated to our special ed classrooms. Some other comments accepting all forms of communication. Absolutely that all staff know how to use and incorporate AAC into their lessons and interactions with students and that they do it. That's key, right? Not just knowing about it, which is great. That's a great first step, but then actually doing it with students in their lessons, ideally. A school where adults and students are familiar with a wide range of communication methods. And there is a culture of giving time for people to communicate via different methods. Absolutely. We know that
hmm
it takes more time, right, to communicate using an alternative method.
And I think sometimes we might hear we're so excited about the AAC and we're want to promote it. We're excited our students have it. And you might hear, use your words and, use your AAC, use your device, even though they've clearly been able to communicate that in a different way. I think several of you were saying that today. It's okay if they non-verbally communicate something, then we're going to accept that.
Absolutely. Here's another one. Students and staff all receiving training and support to be good communication partners. Yes, that's key. While some people are really good at it naturally, not everybody knows how to do it. And when I try to think of how I was as a communicator before all of my training, I didn't know how to do it either. Not forcing communication on kids. Yep. And supporting and modeling without expectation. That's key. And that kind of goes back to what you were just saying, Sarah, too, right?
Yeah, there's more teachers and staff actively requesting and seeking AAC resources to benefit students. Definitely. And part of that is knowing how, right? I think sometimes we have the resources in our districts even, but it's hard to know where to find them. So that's a great thing to think about. And then another comment, accepting and affirming of all forms of communication throughout the school, providing access to communication in all settings, right? Not just one room or when the SLP comes in. Um, yes, great. Did I miss any at the end?
Nope, I think you got all of them.
These are great. I
Um,
want to put these into like a little word something to summarize what you guys all came up with. And then
yeah,
one
here's
more.
mhm.
Mhm.
Making important information like school events accessible to all students in the way that they best communicate. And I'll add to that too, in the way that they would best
Hi.
understand, right? Yeah, that's
Mom.
absolutely a good one.
Yeah. So for those just joining, we're just using the chat or unmute and share. What does it look like? What does it mean to have an AAC affirming school?
This is Camille. I'm driving, so I can't see the chat, but I also just if we're taking like high dreams and hopes, I'm just picturing like light tech AAC everywhere, playground signs, posters in the hallway, floorboards up, and modeling devices in every classroom.
Yes, yes, yes. Wouldn't that be amazing if all of our schools had that? Such a wonderful dream to have. And hopefully, through these conversations, we can start to give you information to help so that that can become a reality. And that brings us to our next question that we wanted to anchor us with too, which is how, so if we talked about this kind of pie in the sky dream idea of what does it mean to be AAC affirming, what is the actuality of how AAC affirming your schools are that you're involved with right now? And you can answer this in any way you like. Unmute and share or type in the chat. It could be telling us about the range, perhaps, of different schools in a district that you support. Um, maybe a number scale, however you would want to represent your answer to this.
And you don't need to tell us the name of your school.
Oh my Lord.
Yep.
It's been like back to back today.
Rose, go ahead.
Well, I'm thinking about within the context where I work, which is at developmental disabilities, used to be DDA, now developmental disabilities community services, same thing. Anyway, I feel like a kind of an exciting moment of work in progress where there's a lot of desire to be affirming and still a lot of gaps in familiarity, knowledge, and understanding of what's out there and how to support it. So I don't know if we're at a 3 on a 1 to 5 scale or we're moving there, but yeah, on the path.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, being on the path, right? Just you're part of the conversations. You're beginning to have these conversations and people are understanding the importance. So I think that's great.
We have some other comments in the chat too. Someone says 8 out of 10 acceptance across the district. That is amazing to me to think that. That's a really high amount of acceptance, especially
Yeah.
when you consider an entire district.
Yeah, and if you are able to unmute or you want to put more information in there, like we'd love to hear what that looks like. Another comment with a hopeful lens. We're on the way, but we're not there yet. Yeah, I think it's always a journey, right? Another comment that last year we were 4 out of 10, this year 6 out of 10 in most places, 9 out of 10 in one school. Wow, I feel like this is so fun to see progress, and maybe you've already reflected on this yourself, but it's really neat to see those changes happening.
I see another comment says people feeling too pushed to stick to schedules or curriculum to have time and energy to focus on alternative or alternate systems of communication. Yeah, we hear that a lot, right? That's one of the barriers that I hear very commonly. It's just, I have to do all of these other things, especially from gen ed teachers. It's hard to just to add this in and seeing it as one more thing instead of a truly integrated piece of their curriculum or education that they're teaching.
And then piggybacking off that is another comment that staff turnover can make it hard to maintain momentum. And that is definitely a reality that I think we all see.
Yeah, I was in a meeting right before this where we were talking about inclusionary practices, and I wish I would have written down what she said exactly, but there was a comment about this and how school districts and buildings need to, she said, like memorialize and basically put down in writing or in some way of documenting what you are doing, whether it's for AAC affirming schools or inclusive practices in general. That way, when you do have that staff turnover, you have something like an artifact of some sort that's like, this is what we do at this school or in this district to be AAC affirming or to be inclusive. So it doesn't just leave with that when that person leaves.
Yeah. And make sure it's available to the folks who are doing that work. That's a really good idea. There's another comment that says, I would say our elementary program is at an 8 out of 10. Wow. And our secondary
Mhm.
program is improving. However, currently hovering around a 5 out of 10. Yeah, but improvement all the same.
Yeah. And I see that a lot in the schools that I go into. I think, especially when you consider embedding AAC around school buildings or in classrooms, that seems to align very nicely, oftentimes with the elementary setting. That is maybe more colorful and has more visuals and all of that. Then when you get into the secondary space, it might look a little bit different and be a little bit harder to push forward with becoming completely AAC affirming.
Hmm. And then in regards to the person who said 8 out of 10, and we wanted to hear more, or was it 9 out of 10? Um, they said we're lucky in my district to have a dedicated speech team solely based around AAC. Wow. There's lots of buy-in after years of training and proof of concept, right? So it wasn't overnight, right? And you have a lot of support. That's great. And then another comment that the 9 out of 10 school success was a result of an assistant principal and a super strong SLP and school psych. And you do see that, right? Sarah says, go with the goers. So you find those people who are excited and then just uh, keep going and hope it spreads.
Right. And I love that idea too of proof of concept because that 9 and 10 school could then hopefully get good data from this, when they have these strong people together in this one building. So then, if and when these people eventually leave and go on to other places, they have the data to prove that what has been done in this building over the years is really helpful.
And then they're going to document it and send it to
Yes,
people so they
exactly.
know.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing all that. What we're going to get into next are these general areas of consideration that we've put together for creating these AAC affirming schools. And these 5 areas of consideration are based in research and also in clinical experience together. And then we'll go in at the very end to some opportunities that we have coming up next year for professional learning at SETC, where we can dive a little deeper into each of these considerations. So the first area of consideration is basically thinking about how do you understand all of those barriers, like the barriers mentioned around turnover and working in a secondary program and things like that, and understanding what those are so that you can systematically address those in whatever way works for you and your school. But then also really focusing on what do we as a school building or even as a district believe when it comes to AAC and inclusionary practices and communication in general. So some key beliefs that we thought of here are, every student is a communicator. And then you see the image there, that's the Communication Bill of Rights. There's several different versions of that. I love this one. It's by Beautiful Speech Life on Teachers Pay Teachers. It's available for free in English and Spanish if you wanted to find that. Um, just recognizing again that all people have the right to communicate. Another key belief being that AAC belongs everywhere and also belongs to everyone. So it's not just a special education thing, right? If everyone is a communicator, and then everyone should have the right to communicate in whatever way is best for them, no matter where they are in a school building. And then that kind of ties into the next bullet, which is that everyone is a communication partner. Therefore, to be a good communication partner, you have to, provide wait time, like we talked about before, and understand those strategies to being a good communication partner. And then finally, AAC is a human right. So again, kind of in line with everything we've been saying, everyone has the right to communicate in whatever way works best for them. So I think, this whole bucket just being making sure that folks in your school building or your district understand and are on the same page when it comes to these beliefs.
Does anyone have something to add to these beliefs?
I see a comment that just says, love them. Yes, I think we're probably all on the same page in this room. If you're coming to this session and you've been coming to AAC Collaboration Corners, you probably already have those beliefs. So the key then would be, how do we share those with everybody else so that we help people who maybe are not SLPs or who maybe do not work in special education to understand that this is what we believe in as a school space. Could that be maybe having a 5-minute communication corner in your professional development building meetings, perhaps, or I've heard of buildings having like a building catchphrase, and it's just something that's like our motto, and it involves some of those key beliefs, and it's maybe posted around the school or something like that. And that takes us into our next kind of category of what you can do to help build an AAC affirming school, which is considering school-wide implementation strategies. And really the key to this is having your administrator support what it is that you're doing. And as Sari said, I always say, go with the goers, run with the runners. Yes, that's a part of it. But at some point, in order to have a truly AAC affirming school building and school culture, you really are going to have that support from admin as well. And that could look like I said, embedding AAC training just in little bite-sized nuggets into professional development plans. Making sure admin support the funding to get, even paying for low tech core paper-based core boards to be available around the building. It takes money and it takes ink and a lot of things that truly are barriers, or can be barriers if you don't have that support. And then making AAC a part of school-wide expectations. This to me is like a pie in the sky dream, but I would love if it became something on an educator's evaluation where like that's a checkbox. Are you providing options for expression and representation in your classroom? And just making it be something that's required and expected.
Sarah, can
I'm
I add
curious.
to that?
Yeah,
Um,
please.
I think I've shared this before, but that makes me think of a teacher who I worked with who, on her own, put that into her TPEP or teacher evaluation, um, so that when she met with her principal, the principal knew communication is going to be one of my goals. So I need to make sure that I'm providing XYZ support for communication for my students. And therefore, going back to that providing funding, she was able to say, here's what I could use from you to support me in my personal teacher goal, which would be access to a color printer, things like that. Or I'd like to host a neurodivergent night in addition to our multicultural night so that we're getting that school community, piece and my students are able to share. So making it part of the TPEP goal was really useful for that teacher. And I think she continues to do that year after year.
That's brilliant, honestly, because it requires the funding then and it requires support from admin if you put it into your own goal. And then hopefully it shows admin that this is something that is important and maybe spread the word to other educators as well. I love that. That makes me think about when I was working in a school building, I would always have my evaluator observe me during a session with a very high needs student who different students who are non-speaking and perhaps had behavior challenges or whatever it might be, because I wanted them to see what it was really like and how all the supports and things that it takes to really provide good service for these students.
Definitely. I think looping in our admin, our tech team, anybody that you can to what you're doing is really helpful. I know that sometimes we would have, when you have the firewalls or something, and you need it opened up for a student so they can access a switch or something like that, a program. And then I've heard of teams who would then send a video of that student with their permission and to the tech team saying, thanks for doing that because this is how I'm able to, what I'm doing with it. And that tech team then became like part of the AT team because they were on top of it.
I love that. See some hearts from folks too. That's really resonating with people. Also in the chat from Lori, possible additions to the Bill of Rights. Acknowledge what is said, even if you think I didn't mean to say that. Presume competence. Yes, absolutely. Another piece of the school-wide implementation that we alluded to before is that training component. Training staff is so key. And I put on here tiered training models. And what I mean by that is you might consider having different types of trainings for whoever it is that you're supporting. So you could have what might be a tier one being like AAC 101. You know, what is AAC? Basic ideas around modeling and communication partner strategies, but really just those fundamental ideas around AAC. But then tier two could be more of like a hands-on training with staff who are using AAC with their students actively. So it's, you know, we've already done the 101. They're ready for more. They want to talk about maybe descriptive teaching. You know, how do I teach using AAC? Just that like higher level work. And then a tier three would be something like coaching or just that really advanced work with other speech pathologists perhaps or teachers again working with students who use AAC and really tweaking and fine-tuning the skills that they already have. And then thinking about that tiered model, how could you do it in a way where you're building capacity? And this is something I talk about a lot too. Most often our AT teams, assistive technology teams in school buildings are not robust enough to do all of this for everybody. So how could you, you know, maybe make an asynchronous training that is the AAC 101 where people take it on their own time, or perhaps doing some of that higher level skilled coaching by a skilled paraeducator who has worked for years with different students using AAC devices. Could they lead some of that coaching with other paras in their school? So just thinking creatively about how to do this in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd love to hear what you all have to say about this, what it's worked for you, and or what are you thinking about doing? There was a comment, are the cards on the lanyard to the right of this slide available? Is that something you just made, Sarah?
I think that it was found on Practical AAC. That's what it says on there. So I
Okay,
do have a PDF of it I'm going to find right now
great.
because what I love about those is, and the reason I put that on the slide is that there are different ways you can do this training too. So it doesn't always have to be that you're training in a, you know, sit and get, like we're going to sit down at the table, we're going to talk about AAC, or even doing hands-on work with devices like you see in that top image. It doesn't have to be like that. Training could also be a blurb in a newsletter or an email, or it could be these little flip books like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a question. Could you share more examples of bite-sized activities for embedding AAC into PD plans?
Yeah, I think how I've seen it done before, there's so many different ways you could do that. Work happened, I see. But it could be, I've seen it done where it's like our communication corner and it's just literally 5 minutes. And we talk about, you know, each month we do instruct on a concept that builds on the other. So maybe it's showing each month this is one type of system and what it might look like. Or maybe it's just really basic AAC 101. So 5 minutes to talk about like what is AAC, and then the next minute or the next meeting, 5 minutes to talk about why a student would use it. Maybe it's a quick story. So sharing a student story. Stories are so powerful. So maybe it's just, let me tell you about the student of mine who uses AAC and how they use it each, and just like continuing to bring it up each month. Or maybe it's a partner strategy, one strategy a month. So it could be lots of different topics, but just the idea of embedding it in a meeting that's already happening. Because so often I hear that I don't have time. They don't, you know, we're all attending all these other PDs. We don't have time to do this. How can we think again creatively about inserting ourselves in other already occurring professional development opportunities?
I love the idea of embedding it into a meeting that's already occurring. And even within your SLP group, I mean, we realize not every school district, many don't have AT teams, right? So it's often you might just be the person who's excited and interested. However, you're just begging for a time to do it. But even if you have an SLP group meeting, I've seen uh, this happen. So, we all have our interest in us in this field too, right? So if you are in an SLP group meeting or an OT group meeting and just saying, okay, any for the last 5 minutes here while they're talking about this or it's breakout time, maybe anybody who's interested in AAC, I'm just going to go over wait time. And you just pull that group together and you do wait time, and then you can maybe build that way.
Yep. And something I've done with my SLP groups in the district that I supported before is that in our whole SLP, we had a separate AAC group for those who are really interested in it. But then in our whole SLP group, we did a strategy each month, and it was based off of the model as a master PAL. So all the materials and work and everything is already put together. And we would literally just take one each month and just like overview, what is this? How do you do it? And let's talk about how we've all, seen it happen in our buildings.
And if you want to find that resource, Master Pal, Sarah will probably put it in here. But if you go back to our running meeting notes, there's a whole session on AAC training for your school. I don't remember what month that was, but we can find it. So go back to our notes page and find that, and you'll find the Master Pal link, and then you'll find all other things and ideas from the group as well. But Sarah put it in the chat too.
Yeah, I linked to NWACS. They have just a really clean page that has all of the different modules all in one spot there. So you can easily access it there. I'm still looking for the flip book. I will find it at some point. I don't know if I'll find it during this meeting, but we'll make sure that you all get it.
Yeah, and don't forget that in our notes again, in each section, we try to put information. So I will, if we find the flip book, we'll stick it in the notes there. So if you're looking for links, we hope that that could be a place where you find everything. Okay, any other ideas about implementation that have worked for you or haven't worked?
Okay, so we can move on to the next category, which is a really fun and exciting one. And I think this is one that people often jump to first. And sometimes even like admin will jump to this first because it looks good, honestly. But this is how do you actually integrate these tools and strategies into the teaching environment? So posting AAC everywhere. And Camille talked about this in the beginning, maybe it's low tech boards in the cafeteria, on the playground, in classrooms, gen ed classrooms. I've seen it in hallways where at the school that I was at, they had a folder that was like taped to the walls in each hallway with just it was like just a pocket full of low tech core boards inside that people could just grab and use with students in the hallway as needed. And then you see on these photos, there's an SLP at the top leading a whole group preschool story time. And she's teaching with AAC, which is the next bullet. So having the core board there is part of it. But then, yes, an important piece of it is teaching what is AAC, but then also like, let's do our general education instruction and use AAC where possible to help with providing another means of representation for our students who are listening to our language. And again, that could be identifying relevant vocabulary, and that could be before the lesson, perhaps doing some descriptive teaching, allowing time for students who use AAC to respond using their systems. And key in my mind is offering all students the options when and where possible, so that if someone just has a preference that day for using something augmentative, that they have that option as well.
This is also a great area to get help with grants because you could make a bunch of large core boards, or you can make the playground core boards. Like Sarah said, it looks good, and folks kind of like to see maybe their company is on there, right? Like provided by a grant from they're out and about. Has anybody had success with any of these ideas or have questions? Okay. All right, we'll move on.
Okay, another really fun one, peer involvement and social inclusion. Oh, before we move on, I see a comment in the chat that says, in our district, the CTE department is printing these playground signs. I
So
love that. That's
career
great.
and technical education.
Hmm. Yeah, and
There, yeah.
to echo what Sari said before, yeah, the CTE has money. I love it. You got to find the money and you've got to be creative with it. And so when I worked in a school building or school district, I sought out our foundation grant. So I would find the school's foundations and write annual grants every year, just slightly different, whether it was printing off a bunch of smaller boards, printing out larger boards, and then assembling them myself. I also got PTSA grants to do that in different buildings that I worked for. And it can be time intensive putting those together, but it's worth it because you're breaking down that barrier that is another common one of, well, I would do it if I had one, but I don't have access to that. And I, don't have a color printer and whatever it else might be.
And then hopping onto that time part, that's where you could also use your CTE students, your honor students. In high school, their kids are always looking for hours, community service hours, right? So finding those folks.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually, that reminds me that another creative thing we did before was having our transition classroom or our transition folks who are students who are adults, age 18 to 22, and having a work group created for them that was around assembling and building some of these core boards. And we had different SLPs across, it was typically SLPs across the district submitting work orders like, hey, I need X number of core boards with removable pieces made. And these transition students were taught and trained and under a job coach as well to build these for us. So that was a really creative way to do it.
Mm-hmm. That is a great idea. Camille works for Toby Dynavox, and she's reminding us that you can ask your local consultants, so AAC manufacturers, for light tech posters and playground signs, and they often have these to give away. That's great tip, Camille. Thank you for sharing. And then Camille, can you put your email in the address in the chat as well for anybody who's interested? And then there's a comment, any ideas or adaptations specifically for middle and high schools? And I'm curious about that for maybe like peer modeling activities or teaching students about AAC. Has anyone done this with older students?
I can jump in while we wait for someone else to. The way I've seen it done with secondary students is around like high interest topics. So creating authentic clubs or groups that are about something that students are interested in, and ideally something that also your AAC user is highly interested in as well. For example, Minecraft, and making sure that maybe if your student is a typer, they can type about it, or if they are a symbol-based user, that they have the vocabulary programmed in their device already, so that these groups of students are together in this really highly engaging conversation or club or group about something they're genuinely interested in. So it's not so much a fake or contrived situation.
I love that idea. There's a question in the chat. Any ideas on how to go about, whoops, it just moved. Um, GLPs using AAC, so Gestalt language processors. And I'm curious, are you thinking about well, what specifically for training folks about that? Because I think we could have a whole nother session on it. And then Sarah put in the chat the AAC 101 flipbook, and we'll add that to the notes too. Sarah, is there anything you wanted to add specifically about GLP and AAC right now, or?
There's nothing that, I mean, I think if we could hear a little bit more about how,
Mhm,
like you said, what specifically this they
mhm.
want to know about it. When it comes to GLPs and peer involvement and social inclusion, I think what I would do with that is just being open and having conversations about what is Gestalt language processing and how does that look for people who communicate in that way. And I really do think if we're thinking about secondary students in particular, that there are so many so many people who communicate using movie quotes and things like that all the time. So just tying it into their life too in some way could be really meaningful. And there's
Definitely.
something in the chat that says that Isaac did a recorded presentation yesterday on GLP and AAC. Um, So yeah, if we could find that, I will look
Oh,
for that. That would be
yeah,
awesome.
great. Yeah, sorry, I see now that you said it's recorded. That's wonderful. And there is a lot out there. So if folks have resources, feel free to put it in the chat. But Sarah and I will note too that this is a good topic for a future. Do we have one, Sarah? Actually, is that part of our?
I don't know. I'll have to look.
Okay, yeah. And then Camille said that NWACS, the Northwest Augmentative Communication Society, is hosting a conference this fall. That's right, with a presentation geared towards caregivers, SLPs, and educators. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Is it a I'm trying to remember who the keynote speaker is. Is it
Alyssa Hillary Zisk.
okay? Yeah, I thought so. I just didn't.
I'm very much looking forward to that. I
Do.
went to their session at ASHA on GLP and AAC, and it was fantastic. So I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Yeah, actually, that's a great resource. Sarah shared with me about their ASHA session, and I'm using that all the time. So,
Mhm.
was there a comment? Sorry if I interrupted someone. Okay, we can move on.
Okay, so our next kind of bucket of what to look for as you're creating AAC affirming school buildings is how do you sustain all of this? So if you're doing all this good work, you're really feeling like you're making good progress. Um, it needs to be worked on and sustained actively over time. And what are different ways to do that? I think one that I love is sharing successes. So that's a big one for me where I write a lot of newsletters and again, people love stories. So I think that it is a way that I tend to try and highlight folks who are doing good work, whether that's in a school building or in our statewide newsletter, and just sharing out what other people are doing. And I find that other people see that as really motivating for them. And they're like, oh, especially if it's in their own school building, that's if they're doing it, maybe I could try it. So really sharing successes and highlighting those who are doing the good work. I think that's an important way of sustaining culture change.
Hmm.
Another idea being creating some sort of AAC steering committee in your building. So perhaps with admin, may or may not have your SLP on the team, maybe a parent maybe a student, people who are really passionate and dedicated about AAC and wanting to see this culture continue over time.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally on there, I put celebrating AAC awareness. So AAC Awareness Month is in October, and that's always a really good time to put out, an email about what is AAC, post it up in your schools, do a bulletin board about it, share links, share videos, put it on social media, whatever way, just getting the word out. And opening people's eyes to the fact that it's everywhere and students that are using it most likely.
Mm-hmm. A super easy thing, some people I see will put it in their email signature, right? Like once a month, if you can remember to change your signature and have a tip or something about AAC, it might catch some eyes. What else are people doing? Sarah mentioned ASHA. That was the American Speech and Hearing Association conference was in Seattle this last year, so that was lucky for us who are near that. But and we know it's not always easy to attend conferences like that or Closing the Gap or ATA, but um, I just want to put that out there that you could try to have a session on something, even at any conference, right? Maybe it's a local conference for families put on by your county, and you could ask, can I share about AAC or something like that, just to start spreading the word. Um, I just wanted to kind of empower you all that you don't have to be someone who professionally presents on this all the time, that just to start sharing the successes in any way possible. Sarah and I are going to be sharing at an MTSS conference hosted by the Washington State Administrative Association. So a different place to get that word out, right? Rather than our schools or our SLPs. There's a comment in the chat, static communication boards for field trips that the whole class can use is something that they've tried. I was surprised at how much the gen ed students liked it and used it as an I Spy conversation. I love that idea. Great idea. Another comment, we had our work experience or slash transition students create monthly picture lunch calendars so all students had access to what was on the menu. I posted them out in the hallways. I've seen a variety of language users connect over these menus. I love that. We in Everett have historically always had a picture symbol communication lunch menu, but it was done by people on the AT team. And I love the idea of two parts of that, having students do it and having it posted so everybody can see it. Great idea.
And I just think these are such important ideas for helping all students. It just comes back to that idea of what is good for one student could potentially be really helpful for someone else, and you don't even realize it. Like maybe someone who's new to the country, just learning English, someone who can't read very well, whatever it is. I mean, these accessibility options are helpful for so many more students than you might initially intend.
Keep sharing because this is how we learn. It's so neat to hear all these ideas.
And I think this is really timely too. I know that many of us are tired and it's the end of a school year, but this gets us excited for next year and planning. Maybe if even when you're laying out in the sun this summer, just like letting ideas percolate, like what's one thing I can do to make my school culture a little bit more AAC affirming? Like, can I share out in our building professional development day before school starts. Can I ask admin for 5 minutes to just talk about who I am, what I do, or what, if you see an iPad that looks like this is what it might be, or, whatever it is, just thinking about one small thing that you can do.